When I woke up that morning, I thought it was going to be just another normal day. Except it wasn't. Today was our anniversary. 12 years of marriage. It wasn't a milestone like 10 or 20, but I wanted to make it special. You see, Sherry and I had a routine life, but one that worked. Sure, there were times when we'd argue about little things like whose turn it was to take out the trash or why I forgot to load the dishwasher. But deep down, I thought we had a good thing going. I had breakfast all planned out. Sherry liked blueberry pancakes with extra syrup, and since I worked from home that day, I figured I'd spoil her a little. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, and I was already thinking about the romantic dinner we'd have tonight at the Italian place where we went on our first date. I even made sure to grab her favorite wine from the store yesterday. All the pieces were falling into place, or so I thought. At around 9 a.m., she came downstairs, looking like a dream in her navy blue blouse, her blonde hair in loose curls. "Morning, Jack," she said, kissing me on the cheek. And just like that, my heart fluttered like we were back in college. "Happy anniversary," I said, holding up a cup of coffee just the way she liked it. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk. "Thanks, babe. I can't believe it's been 12 years, she replied with a soft smile. For a second, I thought she might have teared up, but she quickly turned to grab her purse. "Listen, I have to head out for a bit. There's a meeting at work that's unavoidable." My heart sank a little, but I shrugged it off. "A meeting on our anniversary?" She bit her lip, a little nervous. "I know, bad timing, but it's with a major client. It'll just be a couple of hours, and then I'll be home to get ready for dinner." I nodded, pretending it didn't bother me. "Okay, but don't forget about tonight." "How could I forget?" she said, leaning in for one more kiss before rushing out the door. I didn't think much of it then. In hindsight, maybe I should have. By noon, I'd finished most of my work, but something was gnawing at me. Sherry hadn't texted me once since she left, and that wasn't like her. Normally, she'd shoot me a quick, "meeting's boring," or "thinking about dinner" text, but my phone was silent. I chalked it up to overthinking. I even laughed at myself. "You're being ridiculous, Jack. She's just busy." But then it happened. Around 3 p.m., while I was organizing files in my office, I noticed her laptop on the desk. She rarely ever left it behind when she had meetings. Sherry was practically glued to it. My mind started racing. Was it possible that this so-called meeting was actually something else? "No," I muttered to myself, shaking my head. "You're being paranoid." I needed a distraction, so I decided to head out for a drive. Maybe pick up some last-minute flowers or a dessert to go with dinner. But as I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "She's not at work. Check 5th and Main. Room 214. I slammed on the brakes, nearly causing a car behind me to honk and swerve. My hands shook as I reread the text. My instincts were screaming, telling me this wasn't just a random prank. I knew I shouldn't have gone, but the pull of curiosity and fear was too strong. It only took me 10 minutes to get to the address. The Evergreen Hotel, a boutique spot downtown known for its luxury suites. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I parked and headed inside. The receptionist barely noticed me as I walked straight toward the elevator. Room 214. I stood there for what felt like hours, debating whether to knock or turn around and leave. My brain was screaming, "Don't do it," but my hand was already moving toward the door. I knocked twice, my breath held tight in my chest. No answer. Just as I turned to walk away, I heard the faintest giggle from inside. A sound I knew all too well. Sherry's laugh. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. My hand found the doorknob, and I wasn't even thinking when I twisted it. Unlocked. The door swung open, and there she was, Sherry, lying on the bed, tangled in sheets. And she wasn't alone. I don't know what broke me more, the sight of her or the sound of her laughter. It wasn't just the laugh, but the familiarity of it, like she had been doing this for a while. My mind went blank. All the air felt sucked out of the room, and for a moment, I wondered if I was having a heart attack. Sherry was wrapped in the hotel's white sheets, her bare shoulder exposed. Her head turned toward the man next to her, her eyes full of affection. The same way she used to look at me. And him? He was propped up against the headboard, shirtless, with a smug grin that told me he thought he was untouchable. It wasn't a stranger. No, it was Greg Allen, her boss. The same guy I had once shared beers with at the company Christmas party when he congratulated me on bagging such a catch. I felt like a complete fool. For a second, they didn't notice me standing there, frozen in the doorway. Greg was saying something about their next getaway, his fingers trailing lazily down her arm. And then Sherry saw me. Her whole body stiffened, and her smile vanished so fast you'd think I'd pulled a trigger. "Jack?" she gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. Greg's cocky expression faltered, and he scrambled to grab his pants. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. My gaze was locked on Sherry, on her wide, panicked eyes that darted around the room like she was searching for an escape. I stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind me. "So this is the meeting you couldn't miss, huh?" My voice came out eerily calm, but inside, I was a hurricane. "Jack, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I snapped, cutting her off. "I just didn't think you'd be this sloppy about it. Our anniversary." "Sherry? Really?" She opened her mouth to speak, but Greg, stupid, arrogant Greg, had the audacity to butt in. "Look, man, this is between you two. I don't want any trouble." He was half-dressed now, fumbling with his belt like he was about to bolt. I took a step toward him, and he froze like a deer caught in headlights. "You're not going anywhere," I growled. "Sit your ass down." To my surprise, he obeyed, sinking back onto the bed like a scolded child. Sherry's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, please, let me explain." I let out a bitter laugh. "Explain what? How long has this been going on? 6 months? A year?" Her lips quivered, and that's when I knew. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a full-blown affair. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed, clutching the sheet tighter around her body. "It just... Don't," I warned, my hand shaking as I pointed at her. "Don't you dare give me the 'it just happened' speech." I could feel the rage building, but I forced myself to stay grounded. I wasn't going to let them see me lose control. "You know what's funny?" I said, pacing the room now. "I had this whole day planned. Pancakes for breakfast, dinner at Antonio's, your favorite wine. I even bought you a new bracelet." My voice cracked on that last part, and I hated myself for it. Sherry covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Greg shifted uncomfortably, like he was hoping I'd magically disappear. "Well," I said, exhaling sharply, "guess I won't be needing the reservation anymore, huh?" I turned to leave, but before I could reach the door, Sherry jumped out of bed and grabbed my arm. "Jack, wait. Please, let's talk about this. Don't throw everything away. We can fix this." I stared at her, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I thought I knew, and all I could see was betrayal. "You already threw it away," I whispered, yanking my arm free. "And you didn't even think twice about it." Greg finally found his voice. "Man, come on. You don't have to make a scene. Let's just..." I spun around, my fists clenching. "You should shut your mouth before I do it for you, Greg." He didn't say another word. I opened the door and walked out, slamming it behind me. My footsteps echoed down the hallway as I made my way to the elevator, my breath ragged. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt my knees go weak. I leaned against the wall, my head in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. The elevator doors closed, and the reality hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world. She wasn't mine anymore. When the elevator dinged at the lobby, I stepped out into the bustling crowd, but everything felt like a blur. I needed air. I needed to get out of there before I broke down in front of strangers. I stumbled outside and sat on a bench near the hotel entrance, my hands trembling. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been lying to me? Did our marriage ever mean anything to her? And then, as if the universe hadn't done enough damage, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another cruel twist. But it wasn't a random number. It was Sherry. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. but something inside me wanted answers. I hit accept and brought the phone to my ear. "What do you want, Sherry?" I asked, my voice hollow. "I'm coming home," she sobbed. "Please, Jack, don't leave. I'll explain everything. Just give me a chance." I didn't answer right away. I was too busy watching the parking lot as a sleek black car pulled up to the hotel entrance. My heart stopped when I saw Greg, fully dressed and carrying his overnight bag, climb into the back seat. "Too late," I whispered into the phone before ending the call. As I sat there, watching her lover drive away, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home right away. Couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly around the city, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from spiraling. Streetlights blurred past, and the radio played softly in the background, but I wasn't listening. My mind was stuck on the same loop. Sherry's tear-filled eyes, her whispered apologies, Greg's smug face. I finally pulled into a gas station parking lot and killed the engine. My breath fogged up the window as I sat there, staring at the empty street ahead. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind. The time we moved into our first apartment and couldn't afford a couch, so we ate takeout on the floor. The night she said yes when I proposed in the middle of a rainstorm. Our wedding day, when she looked me in the eyes and promised forever. Was it all a lie? I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the pain shooting through my knuckles a welcome distraction from the ache in my chest. My phone buzzed again. I already knew who it was without looking, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sherry, Jack, please come home. I can't lose you. We can fix this." "Fix this? How do you fix something that's been shattered into a million pieces?" I typed back, "I'll be home when I'm ready. Don't wait up." Then, as an afterthought, I added, "Oh, and tell Greg I said hi." It was petty, but I didn't care. Let her sit with that. I finally made it home just after midnight. The house was eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath. The porch light was on, and through the front window, I could see the faint glow of the living room lamp. Sherry was waiting. I stood outside for a moment, debating whether to go inside or sleep in my car. But then, out of sheer exhaustion, I turned the knob and stepped inside. She was curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her legs. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked up at me like she'd been waiting for hours. "You're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yeah, but don't get too excited." I tossed my keys onto the table and leaned against the wall, keeping as much distance between us as possible. "Start talking." She wiped her eyes and sat up straighter, like she was bracing herself for a fight. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, please, don't insult me. I saw everything, Sherry. You don't get to spin this into some misunderstanding." She flinched, but I didn't care. "How long?" I demanded, my voice colder than I intended. Her lips trembled. 7 months. My stomach turned. 7 months. That meant she'd been seeing him while we were planning our anniversary trip to Hawaii. While we were looking at houses to upgrade from our little suburban starter home. While I was planning a future that didn't exist anymore. "And you were just going to keep lying to me? What was the plan here, Sherry? Were you ever going to tell me?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. I didn't want to hurt you. I was going to end it." "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't give me the 'I was just about to end it' speech. That's the oldest excuse in the book, and I'm not buying it." Her sobs grew louder, and for a brief second, I felt the urge to comfort her. But then I remembered the look on Greg's face, and the compassion drained out of me. "You didn't think about hurting me when you were sneaking around with him," I said, my voice low. "You didn't think about me when you were meeting him in hotel rooms and lying to my face. So don't sit here and pretend you care now." She buried her face in her hands, and the room fell silent except for her muffled sobs. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated seeing her break down like this. But all I felt was emptiness. After a moment, she looked up, her face red and blotchy. "I love you, Jack. I know I screwed up, but I love you. Please, Can't we find a way to move past this? I stared at her, searching her face for some sign of the woman I fell in love with. But all I saw was betrayal. How can you love me and do this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How can you say those words when you've been with someone else? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Jack, please. I need time, I said, standing up. I can't think straight right now. I need space. Where are you going? She asked, panic setting in. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. I don't know, but I can't be here right now. Jack, please don't go, she cried, chasing after me. But I was already out the door. I drove for hours, aimlessly wandering through the city until I found myself parked at the same spot where I proposed to her all those years ago. It was an overlook that gave you a perfect view of the city skyline, the place where I once thought my future was set. Now all I saw were broken promises. My phone buzzed again, and for a split second, I thought it was Sherry. But when I checked, it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. Unknown number. If you want the truth about Greg and Sherry, meet me tomorrow at the Blackbird Cafe at 11 a.m. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Was this some kind of prank? Or was there more to this nightmare than I knew? I didn't reply, but as I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, one thing was certain. I was going to find out. The Blackbird Cafe wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find life-altering revelations. It was a cozy spot with wooden tables, vintage decor, and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee. The kind of place where students came to study, couples held hands over lattes, and nobody's world got turned upside down. Except today, mine was about to be. I arrived a few minutes early and picked a table near the back, away from the windows. My heart was pounding, and not from the caffeine. The mysterious text had haunted me all night. Was this a setup? Was someone playing games with me? Or did they know something I didn't? The doorbell jingled as people came and went, but nobody approached me. I checked my phone. 10:59 a.m. I was starting to think this was a bad idea when a woman in a dark green coat and sunglasses slid into the seat across from me. She pulled off the shades, revealing familiar eyes that widened when they met mine. Joyce? I asked, my confusion growing by the second. Joyce was Sherry's coworker and close friend, someone I never thought twice about. But now her appearance here felt like a bomb waiting to go off. She leaned in, her voice low. I didn't want to be the one to do this, Jack. But you deserve to know the truth. I clenched my jaw, the tension rising. What truth? What do you know? Her fingers tapped nervously on the table. It's not just Greg. He's not the only one. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She looked around, making sure nobody was listening. Greg wasn't her first. He's just the latest. I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the words. You're lying. I wish I was, she whispered, her eyes filled with guilt. But I've known about Sherry's affairs for years. She confided in me once after a company retreat. She said it wasn't about love or even lust. It was about excitement. The thrill of something forbidden. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands gripped the edge of the table as I struggled to breathe. How many? She hesitated, biting her lip. 3 that I know of. There could be more. 3. My mind reeled as I tried to piece it together. Greg wasn't an isolated mistake. He was part of a pattern. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice shaking. Tears welled up in her eyes. I wanted to, Jack. I hated seeing you in the dark. But Sherry is my friend, and I thought she'd stop. I thought she'd wake up and realize what she was doing to you. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. My entire marriage felt like a sham, a house of cards collapsing around me. And now, she's not going to stop, Joyce said, her voice firm. Not unless you do something. She thinks she can keep getting away with it because you'll forgive her. She's counting on you to forgive her. I swallowed hard, her words hitting me like a freight train. Forgiveness. That's what Sherry wanted last night when she cried and begged me to stay. But how could I forgive something this big, this destructive? Joyce reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is everything I could gather: texts, emails, photos. I figured you'd need proof if you decide to confront her again. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Part of me didn't want to look. But the other part, the part that had spent the last 24 hours drowning in betrayal, knew I had to. What do I do, Joyce? I whispered, my voice cracking. Her eyes softened. That's up to you, Jack. But whatever you decide, don't let her manipulate you. Don't let her make you feel like this is your fault. I nodded, unable to speak. She stood up, placed her sunglasses back on, and gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze before walking away. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the envelope like it was a ticking time bomb. The cafe bustled around me, oblivious to the man whose life had just been blown to pieces. Finally, I mustered the courage to open it. The first thing I saw was a series of texts between Sherry and Greg. Greg: tonight at the usual place? Sherry: I'll be there. Can't wait to see you. Greg: you looked amazing yesterday. Jack's a lucky guy, but I'm luckier. I scrolled through messages that were far worse, my heart breaking with every word. There were emails with another man, this one dating back to a year ago. Photos of them at a hotel, laughing, holding hands. And then there were the explicit messages that confirmed what Joyce had said. This wasn't new. I closed the envelope, my stomach churning. How long had I been living a lie? How many nights had I been the fool, thinking my wife was at work late or out with friends when she was with someone else? I left the cafe and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had two options. I could confront her, demand answers, and let her twist the knife even deeper. Or I could be smart about this. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found his name. Mark Hastings, divorce attorney. I hadn't called Mark in years, not since he helped my friend through a messy divorce. But now I needed him. I wasn't going to walk blindly into another one of Sherry's traps. I was going to protect myself. I hit call and brought the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he answered. Mark Hastings. Mark, it's Jack Meyer. I need your help. His tone shifted, serious. What's going on? I looked out the window, watching the world go by like it wasn't crashing down around me. My wife's been cheating on me. I've got proof. I want out. Come by my office tomorrow morning, Mark said. We'll figure this out. I thanked him and ended the call, my hands still shaking. For the first time since I caught Sherry, I felt a sense of control. I didn't know how this was going to end, but I knew one thing: Sherry wasn't going to win. The next morning, I stood outside Mark Hastings' office, the envelope of evidence clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I hadn't slept. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sherry with Greg, her lies playing like a twisted highlight reel in my head. By the time I walked into the office, the receptionist barely had time to greet me before Mark's door swung open. Jack, he said, motioning me inside. He looked just like I remembered. Clean-cut, mid-40s, and no nonsense. The kind of guy who didn't waste time sugarcoating things. Thanks for seeing me on such short notice, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Of course. Let's get to it. He gestured toward the envelope. Is that the proof? I nodded and handed it over. As he flipped through the photos, texts, and emails, his face remained stoic. He'd probably seen worse, but to me, this was the worst thing imaginable. After a few minutes, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. It's airtight. You've got more than enough to prove infidelity, and that'll give you leverage. What do you want, Jack? Are we talking about a clean break? Or do you want to go after her? I hesitated. A part of me wanted revenge, wanted her to feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me. But another part of me just wanted to be free, to leave her lies behind and start over. I want out, I said finally. But I'm not going to let her walk away unscathed. She doesn't get to ruin my life and walk off into the sunset with Greg. Mark nodded. We can do that. First, we'll freeze any joint assets so she can't drain the accounts. You'll need to stay in the house to avoid giving her an advantage. Have you confronted her again since last night? No, I admitted. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Good. Don't give her any warning. Let me handle this. I'll file the papers today, and we'll serve her as soon as possible. Serve her? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. I wish I could see her face when she gets them. Mark smirked. We can arrange that. It'll give you the closure you need. As we wrapped up the meeting, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, I had a plan. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was fighting back. When I got home that afternoon, Sherry was waiting for me in the kitchen. Her eyes red and puffy like she hadn't slept either. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, but the warmth of our home felt long gone. Jack, we need to talk, she said softly, wringing her hands like she didn't know where to start. I don't think there's much to talk about, I replied, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She stepped closer, desperation etched into her face. Please, I know I messed up, but I love you. I do. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, take a break, whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. Her words were like daggers, but I stood my ground. Why now, Sherry? Why beg for forgiveness now, after everything? Tears streamed down her face. Because I realized how much I've hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far, Jack. I never meant to hurt you. I leaned against the counter, shaking my head. You didn't mean to hurt me, but you had 3 affairs? You lied to me for years, Sherry. Do you even know what that does to someone? I know, she sobbed. I know I broke your trust, but I want to make it right. Please give me a chance. I stared at her, wondering how we had ended up here. Was she really sorry? Or was this just another performance? I thought about the texts, the emails, and the way she had looked at Greg in that hotel room. You're only sorry because you got caught, I said finally. If I hadn't shown up at that hotel, you'd still be sneaking around behind my back. Her sobs turned into full-on crying, but I didn't move to comfort her. Couldn't. I'm filing for divorce, I said, the words cutting through the air like a knife. She gasped, her eyes widening in shock. No. Jack, please, don't do this. We can get through it. I'll quit my job. I'll never see Greg again. It's not just Greg, I interrupted. I know about the others, Sherry. I know everything. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Who told you? Does it matter? I shot back. You've been lying to me for years. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? She sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. I didn't think it would come to this, she whispered. I didn't think you'd leave. Well, you thought wrong. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything crashing down around us. I couldn't tell if her tears were genuine or if she was just panicking because her world was falling apart. I'll be staying here, I said, breaking the silence. Mark's freezing the accounts, so don't bother trying anything. You'll get served with the papers soon. Her head shot up, her face streaked with tears. Served? You're really going through with this? Yes, I said, my voice firm. And don't try to guilt me into changing my mind. Her lips trembled. You don't understand, Jack. If we divorce, I'll lose everything. I stared at her, the realization hitting me. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the lifestyle, the house, the security, the comfort of a man who had always forgiven her. You should have thought of that before, I said, walking toward the stairs. Jack, wait, she cried. But I didn't stop. I reached our bedroom and locked the door behind me. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to remember that I was doing the right thing, no matter how much she begged. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My phone buzzed, and when I picked it up, I saw a text from Mark. Papers filed. Let me know when you want her served. I typed back, as soon as possible. I want this over. As I set the phone down, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. This wasn't the end of me. It was the end of her control over me. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the past few days playing on a loop in my head like some cruel highlight reel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sherry with Greg. I saw the texts, the emails, the hotel photos. The betrayal was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made my way downstairs. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Sherry hadn't left the living room. She was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face buried in a pillow. Her shoulders trembled with silent sobs. I stood there for a moment watching her. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. After all, this was the woman I had loved for over a decade. The woman I thought I'd grow old with. But that part of me was dying. And as much as I hated seeing anyone in pain, I reminded myself that she was the one who had caused this. I quietly made a pot of coffee, poured myself a cup, and sat at the dining table. My phone buzzed, and I saw a message from Mark. "She'll be served by noon today. Are you ready for the fallout?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm ready." By 11:45 a.m., the anticipation was killing me. I hadn't told Sherry she was about to be served. I wanted it to hit her like a punch to the gut, the same way her betrayal had hit me. I wasn't proud of that thought, but after everything, I figured I was entitled to a little vengeance. At exactly noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a process server holding a manila envelope. His expression was neutral, but I could see the slight twitch of curiosity in his eyes. "Jack Meyer. That's me," I confirmed. He handed me the envelope. "Your wife needs to sign this." I stepped back and gestured toward the living room. "She's inside." Sherry looked up as the server entered. Confusion etched across her face. When he explained who he was and what he was delivering, her eyes widened with shock. "No, no, no," she cried, shaking her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Jack, please don't do this." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. "You brought this on yourself, Sherry." She stood up, clutching the papers like they were a death sentence. "You can't just throw away 12 years like this. 12 years that you threw away," I reminded her. 3 affairs, Sherry. 3. How am I supposed to forgive that? Her sobs grew louder, and she stumbled toward me, her hands trembling. "I'll do anything. Please, Jack. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Greg. I'll do whatever you want." Her desperation was painful to watch, but I couldn't let it sway me. I had made up my mind. "It's too late," I said firmly. "This isn't just about Greg or the others. It's about trust. And once that's gone, there's nothing left." Her face crumpled, and she sank to the floor, clutching the papers like they were the only thing tethering her to reality. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't do this." I knelt down in front of her, my heart breaking just a little. "I loved you, Sherry. I gave you everything I had. But you took that love and threw it away. You lied to me over and over again. I can't live like this." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Do you still love me?" I hesitated, the truth catching in my throat. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know who you are anymore." Her sobs echoed through the room as I stood and walked away. I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my car keys and left the house, unsure of where I was going. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond. The water was calm, reflecting the clear blue sky above, but my mind was anything but peaceful. I replayed Sherry's words, her tears, the way she had begged me to stay. A part of me wanted to give in, to go back home and tell her we'd figure it out. But I knew better. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Sherry, but it wasn't. It was Joyce. "Joyce, you okay?" Heard she got served. I stared at the message for a moment before typing back. Yeah, she's a mess. I feel like shit, but it had to be done. "Joyce, you're doing the right thing, Jack. Don't let her pull you back in. She'll try to manipulate you. Stay strong." I thanked her and put my phone away. Joyce was right. Sherry was desperate, and desperate people did desperate things. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Sherry. I let it go to voicemail, but the notification popped up seconds later. Against my better judgment, I listened to it. "Jack, please come home. We need to talk. I can't do this without you. I love you." Her voice was filled with raw emotion, but I could hear something else in it. Something that sounded a lot like panic. I deleted the voicemail without responding. When I got home that evening, the house was dark. Sherry wasn't on the couch. For a moment, I wondered if she had left. But then I heard faint noises coming from upstairs. I climbed the stairs and stopped outside our bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see her sitting on the bed, her phone pressed to her ear. "I know, Greg," she whispered, her voice hushed. "He served me today.
I'm scared.
What if he finds out everything?" I froze, my blood turning to ice. Everything? What else was there to find out? She continued, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do. If Jack figures out where the money went, we're screwed." My heart pounded as I processed her words. The money. I thought back to the joint account, the withdrawals I hadn't questioned until now. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't just about infidelity. Sherry had been hiding something bigger. I backed away from the door, my mind spinning. Whatever secrets she was keeping, I was going to uncover them. And when I did, this wouldn't just be a divorce. It would be war. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, knowing that the woman I shared my life with had more secrets hidden beneath the surface? Her whispered conversation with Greg played over and over in my head. If Jack figures out where the money went, we're screwed. What money? Where had it gone? By sunrise, I had a plan. I called Mark and told him everything I overheard. He wasted no time. "We'll subpoena the financial records," he said, his voice sharp and focused. "I'll pull every bank statement, every credit card transaction. If she's been funneling money somewhere, we'll find it." While Mark handled the legal side, I needed answers of my own. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for the truth to come to me. I needed to confront her. Sherry was sitting at the kitchen table when I came downstairs, her face pale, her eyes hollow from a sleepless night. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air. She had tried to make breakfast, but it was obvious her mind wasn't on food. "Morning," she said, her voice fragile. "Morning," I replied coldly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, watching her squirm under the weight of my gaze. "Jack, can we talk?" she asked, her hands fidgeting with the mug in front of her. "Oh, we're definitely going to talk," I said, leaning against the counter. "But first, you're going to tell me about the money." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. What money? Don't play dumb, Sherry. I heard you talking to Greg last night. You said, if Jack figures out where the money went, we're screwed. So where is it? What did you do? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, tears streamed down her face, and she buried her head in her hands. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she sobbed. "Find out what?" I demanded, slamming my coffee cup onto the counter. "What the hell did you do, Sherry?" She looked up, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. "I took money from our savings," she admitted. "About $50,000. I felt the room spin. "You stole $50,000 from me? From us?" "I didn't steal it," she insisted, her voice desperate. "I needed it for Greg's business. He was struggling and I wanted to help him. I thought we could double it and put it back before you noticed." My blood boiled. "So you used our money to fund your lover's failing business? And you thought I wouldn't notice?" "I didn't think it would go this far," she cried. "I thought I could fix it before it became a problem. But things spiraled out of control and Greg kept asking for more. I was going to stop, I swear." I laughed bitterly, cutting her off. "Stop? You weren't going to stop until you bled me dry. How much of our life have you destroyed, Sherry? First the affairs, now the money. What's left for me to salvage?" She sobbed harder, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. I was done being the fool. And then, something snapped inside me. I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, the tears that meant nothing. "You're going to pay me back every cent," I said, my voice like ice. "And Greg? He's going to pay too." She shook her head violently. "He doesn't have the money, Jack. His business is bankrupt." I smirked, the cold satisfaction washing over me. Then I guess he's going to learn the hard way. I walked over to the table and leaned in close, my voice low and dangerous. You thought you could play me, Sherry, but you're about to find out that I don't lose. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal action. Mark moved fast. The subpoena revealed everything. Sherry had been funneling money into a joint account she shared with Greg under a different name. They had tried to cover their tracks, but it wasn't enough. Mark filed a civil suit against both of them for fraud. And then came the final blow. Greg's wife found out. When she saw the legal papers, she reached out to me. Her name was Lisa, and she was just as furious as I was. Together, we decided to make sure neither Greg nor Sherry walked away clean. I met Lisa at a cafe downtown to finalize our plan. She was a fierce woman with a fire in her eyes that matched my own. I want him ruined, she said, stirring her coffee with a vengeance. Oh, he'll be ruined, I assured her. The day Sherry and Greg were served with the fraud lawsuit, I made sure to be there. I stood outside Greg's office building, watching as the process server handed him the papers. His face went pale, and he stumbled back like he'd been punched. Sherry was waiting for him in the car, and when he climbed in, I could see the panic in her eyes. They didn't notice me standing across the street, but I didn't need them to. I was already walking away, satisfied with the chaos I had unleashed. A month later, the divorce was finalized. I got the house, most of the assets, and most importantly, I got my freedom. Sherry and Greg? They were drowning in legal fees and debt. The last time I saw Sherry was in court. She looked broken, defeated, but I felt nothing. The love I had for her had been buried under the weight of her betrayal. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun shining down on me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. I wasn't the man who had been cheated on anymore. I wasn't the man who had been lied to. I was the man who had survived it all and come out stronger on the other side. And as I drove away, leaving Sherry and Greg to deal with the wreckage they had created, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my freedom.